are standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before us.
Welcome to the Forgotten History. I'm so glad you could join us today. We're in Niota, Tennessee, hometown of the famed Harry T. Byrne and Feb Byrne, at the celebration of the issuance of the new commemorative Women's Suffrage Centennial Stamp. And we spent most of that time over in the depot, which is now also where their city hall is and their city community area. And now I'm standing in front of the Niota Library. And on the library, as you can tell, they have placed the mural. And so I'm happy and pleased and honored to stand next to Susan B. Anthony at this mural and talk about it a little bit. The mural was dedicated earlier to celebrate the centennial. It was done by a local artist here, and it portrays different times in the movement. You see far at my right is Harry Byrne, and the yellow roses, of course, that were the symbol of the suffragists. Next is a figure that they have identified as Feb Byrne. She looks like she's marching in a parade. I don't know that she ever actually did that, but it's representational. This is, of course, Susan B. Anthony, who was probably the longest leader of the suffrage movement. Certainly she was not involved in 1848, but very shortly thereafter, when she met Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and was involved up until her death, 14 years before the suffrage amendment passed. And then we have, to my left, Ida B. Wells, of course a Tennessee woman who did most of her work in the Chicago area on suffrage, a journalist who won a number of prizes and very well respected. And next to her is Alice Paul. Alice Paul, of course, was the leader of the National Women's Party, the party that had the silent sentinels at the White House, many of whom were arrested and jailed and so forth. So they have basically recognized the entire timeline of the women's suffrage movement here on the side wall of the Niota Library.
I'm Joe Guy, I'm Sheriff and County Employee here, and unfortunately for you, I've been asked to be the Master of Ceremonies today. So we do appreciate you all being here. It's a very important occasion. One of the more significant historical events that took place in Tennessee with a mid-county citizen specifically. Part of this affected an issue that was a national issue and actually corrected a national issue. So this is certainly worth celebrating and certainly worth remembering. At this time, I want to invite Cohen Carter up to offer the invocation. Cohen's the pastor of First Baptist Church in Niota.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we stand in awe of who you are. You are our Creator, the one who sustains the first and the last. Lord, you are seated above all things. We are thankful, God, for your Son's sacrifice, for the gift of salvation that came to those who believe. Lord, as we gather today to celebrate the 19th Amendment and the courage of a young man and his mother to fight against inequality, Lord, we ask that your Holy Spirit boldens us today, Lord, to fight against the hate, the injustice, the inequality that still exists today. Lord, we ask, Father, that you encourage us, just as Miss Burns said, Father, to be good boys and girls and help. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
I was reading something this week about, just doing a little research on some of our Cherokee history. I came across something I thought you might find interesting. About 1754-55, Attacullaculla, who was one of the Cherokee chiefs that lived over where, just a little around Von Moore today, was in Charlestown. And he had gone down there to speak to Governor William Littleton about the Cherokee trade. This is around the time that Fort Loudon was about to be constructed. They were talking about that. But something came up that was interesting in their conversation that is recorded for posterity. Attacullaculla, when he was talking to the governor, They sort of had a love-hate relationship. Asked Governor Littleton why that the English were unlike the Cherokee, who allowed their women to take part in their government. It was a very pointed question, and the book that I was reading made mention of that. The governor was very uncomfortable to the point of just being angry. And he made some kind of, sort of blew off the question and said more or less, well, we think more of our English ladies than to allow them to take part in government. And as I was prepared, and I know that you all were preparing for this event, I remembered that. And you know, the Cherokees had it right. They had it right over 100 years before. Tennessee and the nation had it right. This week I heard someone in a speech say that America is a work in progress, and I really believe that. But we're still the greatest country that there ever could be anywhere in the world. And I know I'm thankful to live here. I'm thankful for the sacrifices that have been made so that we can gather like this in peace and in freedom and say what we want to say. As we think about those things and we consider our national anthem and again all of the words that we're about to hear, think about that. We are a work in progress. And again, it's been this way since our founding. And I hope that it's always that way, that we're always working toward a common goal to make things better for our people and our nation. At this time, please stand. We'll invite Yvonne Hayes to come up and sing our national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
At this time, the man that occupies the seat in our state house that Harry Byrne occupied when he cast that fourth vote, Mark Cocker, will ask Mark to come up and deliver a few remarks. Mark.
Thank you very much, and I'll start off by saying thank you to Tyler Boyd for doing all the research for my remarks this morning. I'm going to use your book a lot, so thank you for all of your many hours of hard work. You know, I was very honored to be one of the few people initially asked to read the manuscript of the Harry T. Byrne biography written by Tyler. It was an incredible read, and you know, they say that the best books are the ones where you connect with that main character. And I can tell you without a doubt, as I was reading that, I was reading it directly after my first year in office. And so the many circumstances and the things happening to Harry T. Byrne really leapt off the pages at me because I had just been there. And as a freshman Republican legislator from McMinn County, I related to a lot of the things that he encountered, you know, on both sides. And so, you know, during my term that first year, there was even a tie vote on a very huge issue on the House floor. It was a tie vote that kept the voting board open for 20 minutes. And so, you know, as I stood there watching that, I asked the legislator next to me, I said, "Have you ever seen anything like this in your life?" He said, "No, I haven't." And so at that moment, I kind of I remember Harry T. Byrne and what a huge tie vote he was a part of, just at that time, 99 years prior. And so when Harry was elected, I think he was 22 or 23, Tyler, I always get that mixed up. 22 when he was elected, so, and was the youngest member of the entire House of Representatives. I'm the youngest Republican currently serving. There's one Democrat who is younger. And so that sometimes can present its challenges when you are the youngest member, and maybe you even look a little bit younger than what you are. I was going to share one thing real quick with, I thought Tyler had brought something very interesting to bear there. So while Tyler writes in his book, while Byrne was away in Nashville, he wrote home on December 31st after arriving at Hotel Tulane. And so he talks about how that's going to be his permanent home while in Nashville. And this was the part I found interesting in Harry's letter. He says, "I've already succeeded in becoming the joke of the lobbyists on account of my age." When a crowd of men had asked the state senator from McMinn County how the representative was doing, Byrne said, "I actually think he looked embarrassed just because of how young I am." And so I think the first several weeks I was there, I got asked legitimately 5 or 6 times, "Hey, who are you here interning for?" And so, again, when I read those words from Tyler's book, I immediately had a connection with that because the struggle was real. I understand it. So, and then as a legislator, I guess as a whole, but especially as a freshman, there are so many different places you look for influence and for advice on key issues. I had the opportunity of working with Senator Mike Bell, who was in my seat before me. Senator Bell and I rarely differ on a vote, and if we do, it's usually not because of a philosophical difference. It's just maybe a language of a bill. So I can always go to him and ask for advice. Byrne didn't quite have that advantage with Senator Candler, who as we know was a rabid anti-suffragist and maybe a little bit of a nut. He didn't really have that person in a senior position that he could go to and ask for that guidance. And so the other one are obviously opinions of people at home, right? I mean, people that now they send you emails and Facebook messages and that type of thing, offering their advice on votes to take. That can be a tough position as well. Again, when I was reading in Tyler's book, I noticed not many things have changed because there are varying opinions on issues. And so two that really jumped out at me, at that time they would send telegrams. They sent telegrams during the special session telling Harry how to vote one way or the other. And these are people on both sides of the issue that Harry knew, loved, and respected. And so this one I thought was good. This was one against, and this was a telegram. 90% of your friends and the people of McMinn County are expecting you to vote against ratification and not to violate your oath of office. A vote for it will defeat you in spite of hell, it says. And then, so on the other side, so he just got a telegram that says all of his friends want him to vote against. So the next telegram he gets, your friends at home expect you to vote for suffrage. So, I mean, there is that challenge, to actually kind of get the pulse of your constituents and your friends back home and see where the people stand and to get that advice. And so, and then also, and this was the ultimate, one of the ultimate influences, I think, in Harry's case, is your family. You talk to your family and ask their opinions on issues, and we know that they have had an enormous influence on Harry's eventual vote. And so, but regardless with whom you consult, it ultimately comes down to you, right? You're the person casting the ballot. You're the one putting your name beside that vote. You live with it. You live with the political consequences, and ultimately you live with the historical consequences of your vote. And so, while Harry was only 23 years old, I think he had wisdom beyond his years. And I think he had a true grasp of the immensity of that situation. And while I think Febb's letter was a huge influence. I don't think that we can say that is the only thing, because I think that takes a little credit away from Harry's character, but you know, a lot of that was taught to him by Febb. So this was after Harry made that time-raking vote. There were many accusations, right? Was he bribed? Was he bought off? How, you know, why did you change your vote? And like I say, he didn't necessarily change his vote. He voted to table it twice, and then he voted for the amendment. But the next day, Harry sent a letter to the clerk to just clarify his position. And again, I think this reveals the nature of Harry's character and reveals that he knew the bigness of the moment. Harry says, "I believe in full suffrage as a right. I believe we had a legal and moral right to ratify. I know that a mother's advice is always safest for her boy to follow, and my mother wanted me to vote for suffrage. I appreciated the fact that an opportunity such as seldom comes to mortal man to free 17 million women from political slavery was mine. I desired that my party, both in state and nation, might say that it was a Republican from the mountains of East Tennessee who made national women's suffrage possible at this day, not for any personal glory, but for the glory of his party." And so, the last thing I just want to mention as I read this book as a freshman legislator was how big Harry T. Burn was. And I know I've said it many times, but I truly feel like I stand on the shoulders of a giant, because Harry T. Burn knew the principles of this nation. He knew the founding of this nation. He knew that ultimately a vote for freedom, regardless of what that situation is, that was the right vote, regardless if that gets you beat or not. A vote for individual liberty was the right vote. And so I have the utmost respect as a freshman legislator for Harry T. Burn, for the legacy of Harry T. Burn, and it's an honor to be in his seat 100 years removed. And thank you very much for allowing me to represent you in that seat and for allowing me to be with you today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, or is it afternoon yet? Febb Burn, such a lady. Just think about it. Can you even imagine? And it is such an honor and a privilege to be standing here today and have been asked to talk about her as her great-granddaughter. So a few things about, I want to talk about a few things about Febb and her husband, James Lafayette, and Harry, and how it relates to everything in this community right now in Northern Tennessee. Febb's husband was James Lafayette, who was also Harry's father. And if you didn't know, James Lafayette was one of the co-founders of Crescent, or was Crescent Clothing Mills, now it's Crescent Sock Company. This was organized by a group of gentlemen standing right out there at the Niota Depot, right here in this place. They were trying to figure out what would be a great industry to put in this area, and they came up with a hosiery mill. It had the access of the railroad here, so they could bring materials in, they could ship goods out. And also the very interesting thing about it being organized at the depot was Crescent got its name from the line that went from here to New Orleans, to the Crescent City. So that's how Crescent got its name. So, anyway, as we go along, Harry Harry Jr., Harry T. Burn as we know him, I didn't mean to say Jr., that's his son, my apologies, was a director at Crescent at one time. Now let's flip back to Febb. Febb was well educated. She was a teacher. She was well read. She read multiple newspapers every day. When her husband died, she not only was in charge of raising her family, but also in charge of running the farm. They had workers at the farm. They couldn't read. Febb was really, besides her children, the only educated person there. So she did all this, and can you imagine how she thought, I'm here doing all this work, and I can't even vote. I can't even vote. So I think that she was doing more than her share and doing a man's job. And I think she kept thinking about this, and when her son had an opportunity for this chance to change history, she was very strong, passionate, and I think very savvy with the way she conveyed her thoughts to her son when she wrote the letter to him. And the vote, and the result was the historic vote. We need to all remember to follow our soul, our hearts, our thoughts, our vision, because I think we all can make a difference. We need to create our path and follow our footsteps. Thank you.
We all know the many, many women who fought so hard for over 7 decades to bring that possibility for women's suffrage to Tennessee. It also landed on the shoulders of, as Mark said, the youngest member of the House, Harry T. Byrne. But it was the letter from Bev Byrne which she wrote to her son to encourage him to do the right thing, to be a good boy and vote for suffrage. And that changed that red rose to a yellow rose. Changed his mind, or solidified his mind, that he knew the right thing to do, and that was to vote to ratify the amendment. That historical letter was mailed from right here in Niota, Tennessee, with a stamp, 2 cents, I think, right, back then. But to me, the significance of that, you know, a stamp on a letter encouraging Harry to do this, and yet today we are unveiling a stamp for women's suffrage. I am very proud to be one of 5 living descendants, or 5 living great-grandchildren of Bev. My sister Kathy, our cousins Jack Byrne and Roseanne Byrne, and our sister Pat Byrne Cotton, who could not be here today. But I know she is here in spirit and watching probably on the live feed. So, hi Pat, we miss you and wish you were here. Ladies and gentlemen too, I guess, remember to be registered to vote, and remember to vote, because we all know that one vote can and did make a difference. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. It means a lot to me that you folks came out in a challenging time for our country and our globe was going on. I think we have good weather. And of all the places I've been to celebrate this amendment over the past year, I mean, Jack and I got something to New York back in the winter, and I was in Nashville last week. But this is the place I was looking most forward to being. No one else would rather be right here in this depot with families here and celebrating this. I'd also like to say that Patty, the representative from the U.S. Post Office in Chattanooga, is welcome to take a seat up here next to Mayor Curtis. Okay. Yeah, we'll love to have you unveil the stamp with the family later. Well, the legacy of Harry T. Byrne is something I didn't know a lot about beyond the 19th Amendment enfranchising tens of millions of American women. And of course, he didn't get there by himself. Women worked for over 72 years to even get Tennessee to this point, and he's fortunate to be in the position to be deciding vote. Well, even after he cast that vote, he has a lot of help. Joe Snyder and Bill Snyder's uncle, Will Snyder, the blacksmith, was Harry's bodyguard when he came home, just in case he was hurt. He wasn't. And whenever they were accusing him of taking a bribe, Paul's great-grandfather, Hugh Monk Wilson, defended him, saying, Harry Byrne did not take a bribe. I know my whole life he wouldn't do such a thing. So the community rallied behind him. And there are all sorts of telegrams on the wall back there from all sorts of great Niota families that congratulated him, not just Wilson Snyder, but also the Reagan, Sherman, and Knox, and Hicks families, and Forrest, and Eagle. And I'm so glad a lot of the families here today. I always thought Harry T. Burns' career ended in 1920. I saw the marker out there at the cemetery as a child, and I thought, okay, he's in the state senate. He's a delegate to a constitutional convention from Roane County, and what's that? I guess he has a constitution. I didn't know that. I was like, what that is? No one really looked into that, so I started looking into that, and I discovered that in addition to the 19th Amendment's legacy, I discovered that his political career continued on all the way to the 1970s for 50 plus years, off and on. Not a career politician in office, forever. He's in and out of other offices. And he was an advocate for universal suffrage in Tennessee. He supported lowering the voting age, voting to get rid of Tennessee's poll tax. He also built up more precincts in this county. He also built to have permanent voter registration. Anything he could do to make it easier to vote, and also to make sure there was no election fraud, which plagued this area in his time. And in addition to that, his legacy is also the example he set as an ordinary citizen, a young person from a middle-class family who didn't have the name recognition of, in his day, Washington or Lincoln or Roosevelt, and now it would be Kennedy or Clinton or Bush. He got engaged, he ran for office, and he found himself in a position to enact significant legislation with the 19th Amendment. Now, you're going to have a chance to do that, Mark or Mike. I don't think you're going to be voting on a constitutional amendment in your time in the legislature anytime soon. But you're voting on things that affect our lives people don't realize, and I hope people realize. Pay attention to your local government. Pay attention to state and local government, how they affect your taxes, your schools, your infrastructure, your voter qualifications, all sorts of things like that. It's not all about Washington. Harry T. Burns knew that. He kept it local. And I think that's one of the best parts of his legacy. And during my research, I really enjoyed discovering everything else he did in his life and how all this 1920 was really just the beginning. And I'm glad to have his whole life and a single source for the historical record, time of his anniversary, very thankful for that. And I'm also thinking about my cousin, Harry T. Burns Jr. If he were still around, he'd probably be in the left side of his home, laying down watching this on an iPad, and then if someone said Harry T. Burns, he would be like, it's Burn, B-U-R-N. So I can imagine that's what he would be doing. So, but I'm glad a lot of Burn families here, a lot of great family and friends are here, and I think about the ones that are longer with us. And 100 years only comes once. Thanks to everyone who helped organize this event, contributing your talents, including me too. I really appreciate that. I'm going to end with a video.
This article says that you are the father of women's suffrage. What is that all about?
Well, that's the first time I've ever been so designated. It's the first time I've ever heard the words expressed in that particular manner. I had always been given credit, of course, properly so, for having cast the deciding vote that gave women the right to vote.
Are you a member of the legislature in 1918?
I was elected in 1918. I served in the regular session of 19 and 19, and this was a special session in August 19 and 20, near the end of my first term.
Now, what did you do to give the women in this country the right to vote?
Well, it took 36 states in to amend the federal constitution. There were 48 states, and 35 had already ratified. And they began a drive to try to get a 36th state, and they prevailed on Governor Albert Roberts of Tennessee to call a special session of the legislature. It was called in early August 19 and 20. And the state Senate passed the resolution, say 3 or 4 to 1, overwhelmingly. It came on over to the House. They first thought that the House would pass it maybe by a 5 or 10 vote majority, but there was hundreds and almost thousands of lobbyists around Nashville from all over the United States because it was a national question. And I had left Niota, my farm, and where my mother lived, going to Nashville planning to vote for women's suffrage. But after I got over there, my political advisors, the elderly statesmen in McMinn County, suggested that we ought to let it go over till January, the regular session.
Then it was actually your deciding vote and your work that passed the amendment?
Yes, they made a motion to table, the opposition did, and I was willing to let this go till the January session, so I voted to table. And the vote was 48 to 48 a tie.
Tell me, Harry, are you happy now that
Yes, I've been asked that question 10,000 times, and I've always been glad to answer yes. I've always been glad I did.
Thank you, Tyler. We're fortunate to have a county mayor who's not only my friend, but also quite the historian himself. And we'll ask County Mayor John Gentry to approach the podium and speak about McMinn County's unique political history.
I suppose it's still technically good morning, so I want to thank you for allowing me to share time on this program celebrating a world-changing event. And I believe when you have half the population of the most influential nation in the world becoming franchised, I believe it is a world-changing event. I want to thank the committee for organizing such a wonderful celebration. It doesn't seem so long ago that we were here 25 years ago celebrating the unveiling of a stamp commemorating the 75th anniversary of women's suffrage. When I received the email of today's agenda from Tyler earlier this week, I saw that he had me to speak on McMinn County's unique political history. And I think unique is Tyler's polite way of saying peculiar. And for some reason, he thought of me to deliver remarks about peculiarity. So, thank you, Tyler. This past year, we celebrated McMinn County's bicentennial. And it was our desire that our citizens would take some time and learn and reflect on their home county's unique, if not peculiar, history. McMinn County native and author Stephen Byron, he probably wrote the most authentic recollection of McMinn County's perhaps most famous event of the 1946 Battle of Athens. In Chapter 7, he entitles it, Always a Political Hotbed. And he writes of McMinn County's continuous thread of political activism and enthusiasm. Events in this small rural county in southeast Tennessee seems to impact the nation all the way from its founding. The county was carved from the Cherokee Nation, and sadly the legal precedent for the removal of the Cherokee started in the newly constructed courthouse in the new county seat of Athens. It would impact the nation. Joseph McMinn, our namesake, was mentored by Andrew Jackson. And the irony is that letters from McMinn County flooded Washington, D.C., asking that the Cherokees be allowed to stay. We move quickly to the Civil War, and we find McMinn County torn asunder, as described in county historian Bill Aiken's book, Torn Asunder, a story of McMinn County during the Civil War. And while McMinn County and Niota especially were strong areas of Union loyalty, our geographic location and railroad made us a thoroughfare for both armies. We are seated today among bullet-ridden walls of that conflict. I often wonder, what would have happened if women had the right to vote from the day of our initial independence? Would there have ever been a Civil War? Tennessee's first two governors following the war had strong McMinn County ties. Parson Brownlow, the first governor after the Civil War, was the pastor at what we now know as Keith Memorial Methodist Church. The next governor, DeWitt Centric, following Governor Brownlow, was from McMinn County. And Tennessee became the first state readmitted to the Union. And it was said that Reconstruction was more peaceful in Tennessee than any other former Confederate state. Thank you for those from McMinn County. And then we move quickly to the Spanish-American War, and we find McMinn County being perhaps the most peculiar county in the country. And I see Paul Wilson's probably nodding his head. Why?
Peace with Spain.
So according to the historian Dr. Byron, the McMinn County Court was the only county court in the nation ever to declare war on a foreign nation. McMinn County declared war on Spain before the United States Congress ever declared war on Spain. And before my term is up, I'll talk to Paul Wilson. We have determined that we're going to sign a peace treaty, and we're going to personally deliver to Spain our peaceful intentions to end that long conflict. We're now going on, 122 years of conflict with Spain, and it must come to an end today. I I suppose if women had the right to vote, we would not have declared war. But our uniqueness is perhaps best summed up in the 1946 Battle of Athens, often called America's only other successful revolution. And this political battle ended up leading to reformation of local governments throughout the South. It ended the poll tax. It ended fee grabbing policies of sheriffs and how they were funded. And locally, it was fought by men who had been some of the most decorated soldiers of World War II just a year or two earlier. The heroic men of Company B, 117th Infantry, 30th Division, the Old Hickory Division, comprised of McMinn County men, boys. They landed on the beaches of Normandy. They were the first to break through Hitler's secret lines. More enlisted men from that National Guard unit became officers than any other National Guard unit in the entire United States Army during World War II. And I wondered, did the war make them great? Did the war make them unique? And it hit me, no. McMinn County sent them over there as unique and great young men. So of course it was no surprise that the brave act to enfranchise women would also have its roots here in Niota, McMinn County. It had to come from Niota. It had to come from McMinn County. It already had the history of changing the country. God knit Harry T. Burns' story together, just as I believe he's knitting every one of our stories continues together. But I only know where it will ever end. We hope it won't. We hope McMinn County continues to have a part in making this country better. I saw the agenda and I knew there were a lot of speakers. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I just didn't want to take a lot of time, but we just celebrated 200 years. There are a lot of local history books and Tyler has added to the collection. It is worth the read. You can't read these books by Byron and Aikens and Joe Guy and Tyler and not leave super proud of where you're from. Thank you.
John, Tyler, I appreciate the plug for our books. Appreciate that. We're very fortunate to have a fine person, a good friend, serving in our state senate. Mike Bell, he served for some time there, and I won't go into how long. I'll let him speak about his career there. But he would like to come and share a few remarks with us about serving again, as Mark does now, in the same legislative seat as Harry T. Burns.
I have to do now that I've shaved my head is take my mask off so nobody in the states me for Sheriff Guy. That won't be so bad, Sheriff Guy. I do appreciate your service. And it's an honor to be here today. And before I make a few comments, I do want to recognize my colleague, Senator Massey, down here on the end, who's going to be speaking. Came down today, and so glad to have her here in McMinn County and Niota. Tyler, I want to go back. You and I probably knew each other, maybe on Facebook or something, but when I first heard from you and you contacted me that you were writing this book, and when I look at a manuscript and read a little bit about it, and then consider offering a blurb for the book when he did the book. So I got it. Of course, I knew who Harry T. Burns was. I knew that he made the pivotal vote for women's suffrage. But what I didn't know was that he also went on to serve in the state senate. He was a very successful businessman, a pillar of not only this community, but later Rome County, when he moved to Rome County, but then also that he served as a delegate to 4 state constitutional conventions. I guess, and Tyler, you may have written this in your book, I doubt anybody in our state has served in all 4 state constitutional conventions of the 20th century. I doubt anybody in the history of our state served as a delegate for 4 constitutional conventions. And that speaks to the type of man Harry T. Burns was. Again, I knew about his vote. We all knew about his vote. But what he went on to do later in life and with his whole life just impressed me even more. And again, when I got through reading the manuscript and offered a blurb, and got the word back to Tyler. And then when the book came out, and I'm looking at it, first thing I want to do, well, hey, did he put it in my blurb? Did I open it up? And, yeah, I'm first, wow. And then I noticed it was by alphabetical order. I was first. My last name was Bell. But still was an honor, Tyler, and even more so to learn about the type of man that Harry Byrne was. And then to serve not only in this House seat that Mark and former Representative John Corrigan served in, but also the Senate seat that he held as well. We were in Nashville last week, and they did a reenactment. Now, this reenactment, I wish I'd thought to look up the link where I could tell you where to go to watch it. It was professionally done. We had actors serving in the main positions. Now, myself and Representative Cochran, Senator Massey, and other legislators, we got to play bit parts. We got to be part of the General Assembly, part of the House floor that took the votes, and we got to say aye or nay, depending on what character we were representing. I was representing a gentleman from Ray County who was a no vote on women's suffrage. But at the end, we all wore yellow roses. But this reenactment was professional, well done, and again, it helped drive home the dramatic nature of what happened that day, because it was realistic. They used the quotes from the different members, and we hear, and I know all of us, I get tired of the negativity in politics. It's no worse today than what we heard them say on the floor 100 years ago. They were vicious. Candler has already been mentioned. I mean, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but he talked about women who were low neckline skirt or low neckline blouses and high skirt women, and said some other things that were pretty demeaning of women. We heard those type of speeches on the House floor in this reenactment last week as well, said by people who were in office, and I'm going, oh my goodness, if something like that was said today, we'd be run out of town, as well we should. And it just lets you know how the times have changed. But it also impressed me even more about what type of young man. It's hard to imagine, and I'm 57, and I'm sitting there listening to this, what a 22-year-old was thinking about, and what was going through his head as he was hearing this vicious debate and part of the vicious lobbying that went on for a couple of weeks prior to the vote. And again, it just makes me even respect Harry Byrne even more. I do have something, if I could ask Representative Cochran to come back up here. Representative Cochran and I did a Senate joint resolution, and we're going to read that this morning to recognize this day and to recognize the role that Mr. Byrne played. Mark, I'll start out and I'll read about half of it and let you go. A resolution to honor Representative Harry T. Byrne, the deciding vote on the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution in Tennessee. Whereas for more than a century, women of the United States of America were not entitled by law to the full rights and privileges that were available to male citizens of the United States. And whereas a joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States extending the right of suffrage to women was passed by the United States Congress on June 4th, 1919, and ratified by 35 states. And whereas on August 13th, 1920, the Tennessee Senate voted in favor of ratification, and on August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified by the vote of the Tennessee House of Representatives. And whereas Representative Harry T. Byrne of Niota cast the deciding vote on that historic day as documented on pages 91 and 92 of the 1920 Journal of the Tennessee House of Representatives, and whereas Representative Byrne's deciding vote has been accredited by historians Dr. Marjorie Sproul, history professor at the University of South Carolina, Elaine Weiss, best-selling author of The Women's Hour, and Paula F. Casey, editor of The Perfect 36, Tennessee Delivers Women's Suffrage, and
as I finish up these last whereases, I do want to make this point. One reason that Senator Bell and I felt that it was very timely and appropriate to file this resolution. There have been a few folks at the state level who've been trying to give some credit to another gentleman for casting that deciding vote. while that person had influence in the ultimate decision, it was our guy who cast the deciding vote, and we want that on the record that Harry T. Byrne was the deciding vote for women's suffrage. And so whereas his historic vote was also highlighted in the Ken Burns documentary and companion book, Not for Ourselves Alone, and the National Public Television documentary by Women Vote, Suffrage in the South, as Dr. Carol Busey describes his deciding vote. And whereas the role of the state of Tennessee and the deciding vote of Representative Harry T. Byrne was instrumental in achieving the right to vote for all women of the United States, being the 36th and final state needed to ratify the amendment. Whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent achievement and the liberties and rights of women of the United States of America, its memorable anniversary and the celebrations that will commemorate the occasion. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the 111th General Assembly that we honor the memory of Representative Harry T. Byrne on the centennial celebration of Tennessee's ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which gave women of the United States the right to vote. Thank you, Kurt.
And Representative Walker and I would like to present this, I guess, to the committee, and if you would take it down to Fuller's and have it framed, we'll take care of the framing costs, and you can hang it here at the depot.
Thank you very, very much.
Pull the mask down, find the glasses. It's tough up here. McMinn County has again, as John was speaking about, a very unique history, political history, especially women and their leading and their roles in local government. It just came to my mind, the Mark may know the specific name of the lady who was actually the mayor of Inglewood. Is it Brenda? Brenda, that's right. Do you remember if that was before or after the suffrage vote?
That would have been after the suffrage vote, but giving credit usually as one of, if not the first female mayors in the state.
Exactly. So there's just another example of McMinn County sort of leading that charge, setting that example. We have a former Athens mayor in the audience with us, Ann Davis, and so Lois Priest continues that tradition here in an example of women in leadership, women in local government. We want to invite her to the podium to talk about women leading in government.
I think it is afternoon now, and I was assigned the topic of women in government. Since the pivotal vote on August 18, 1920, ratifying the 19th Amendment, women have come a long way being involved in government. There is established and growing evidence that women's leadership in political decision-making processes improves the processes, and that women's representation in local government makes a difference. Although women have come a long way since the pivotal vote, we still have a long road ahead of us to acquire equal representation throughout our federal, state, and local governments. As the numbers show on the federal level, as of 2020, women occupied 127 of the 537 seats in the United States Congress. In the House of Representatives, women held 101 of the 435 seats. In the Senate, women hold 26 of the 100 seats. On the state level, only 9 U.S. governors are women in 2020. Think of how many states we have. Women hold just 28% of the statewide elected executive offices around the country. Women's share of U.S. state legislature is growing, but men still occupy the majority. Women hold 519 of the state Senate seats, and 1,637 of those seats are held by men. There are more than 5 times as many women serving in the state legislature now than before 1971. On our local level, as of September 20th, 2019, 22% of all U.S. cities with more than 30,000 residents had a woman as mayor. Women served as mayors in 27 of the 100 largest cities in the nation. And the average percentage of women in the small cities is 32%. Since the foundation of the city of Nyota's government in 1911, there have been only 5 female mayors, with the first being elected 69 years after the government started. We have Ann Webb from 1980 to 1986, Effie Lonis from 1988 to 1998, Kay Alexander from 1998, Martha Walden, 2006-2010, and myself, 2011. Women do face a number of challenges that affect their ability to participate in politics and become political leaders. As women, if we choose to pursue a political career, we also, in addition to having the demands of running our homes, the businesses, and many other obligations, to go along with the endeavors of a political career. However, today we are exploring measures that may increase women's participation in government at all levels, from the local to the national. It is encouraging that more and more women are pursuing leadership positions in the present day. Now, to bring this concept of women in government much closer to home, I want to tell you my story of my journey and how I became mayor of Nyota. Interestingly enough, it was a man that encouraged me to run for this position. In the spring of 2011, as I was sitting at my desk as principal of Nyota Elementary School, counting the days until my retirement that June, my secretary announced that there was a gentleman that wanted to talk to me. When he entered my office, he started a conversation about me becoming the mayor of Nyota. He said the city had been without a mayor for several months and the position had to be filled. Then again later that month he returned and asked me once again to consider the position as mayor. Then another male citizen asked me to step up as no one else had yet done so. At this time, I truly had not seriously considered such a position as my past experience revolved around education. I served in education for 40 years, ending up at 36 years at Nyota School. Doubting my abilities to lead the city, I reluctantly agreed to take the challenge. So in the May 2011 commission meeting, a male commissioner, Richard Rutledge, nominated me to become the next mayor. He didn't get a second to his nomination or to his motion, but instead it was decided to run an ad in the local newspaper asking for a mayor for the city. So the ad ran and I was the only respondent. Where were the men? They didn't step up to fill the position or even to answer the ad. Finally, at the June 2011 meeting, I was reluctantly voted in as the mayor of Nyota. So where have the men been for the last 40 years? From the first female mayor took office in 1980 until the present time, which is 40 years, women have held the leadership role in Nyota as mayor for 35 out of those 40 years. Women in this small town have taken the lead and have played a tremendous role in moving the community forward. I really enjoyed being mayor through the difficult times, which there were a lot of, and the good times, which there's also been many of. And I personally feel that Nyota has prospered in the last 40 years because of the mayors and the board of commissioners working together as a team for the benefit of the city, as it truly does take a village, not just one person. Today, we can look back on the many great accomplishments that our women leaders have brought to our city, while continuing to look ahead to future and full promise of progress ahead. And this is just a reminder, as you leave today, this exciting 19th Amendment and state celebration, take time to look directly across the street at our 19th Amendment mural. It also makes a great photo op. Thank you for your time.
Did you know that in 1995, when we celebrated the 75th anniversary of suffrage, I did a survey of the state of Tennessee and could not locate one single memorial, bust, even a plaque that commemorated the Southern women, the women of Tennessee, who worked so hard to get us the right to vote in what was a more hostile climate in terms of culture than the northern states women had to face. And so that's when we determined to form the Suffrage Coalition and to put in the Tennessee Women's Suffrage Memorial on Market Square. And since that time, we now have memorials in every major city in Tennessee. We have Jackson has a Sue Shelton White bust outside of one of its public buildings. Memphis is unveiling a series of busts. Nashville has a monument that they just dedicated, and of course Knoxville has the two monuments, the Tennessee Women's Suffrage Monument and the Harry Byrne the Byrne Monument, not the Harry Byrne Monument. It's Harry and Bev both on that monument. And so we've come a long way in that regard, but moreover, we have generated enough interest in this story that we have murals like this one, not exactly like it, but murals in communities all across the state. Some are a part of the project that we did a show on a little bit earlier when we talked to Paris Woodhull, and some have been done by local groups who have just formed to honor the suffragists. Johnson City has a brand new one that will be unveiled October the 10th, or will be dedicated on October the 10th, and it features, among other people, the grandmother of Nashville's mayor, John Cooper. So it's just really exciting for me to see these things popping up, not just in Tennessee, but even in other states. I've been contacted by people in Georgia and Kentucky and other places that want to honor their suffragists. And so, with any luck, if we keep this work going, we will succeed in uncovering and preserving the history of women's suffrage.
Standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me, I am honored by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller, I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me.